Pivoting now to betrayal trauma, I want to explain to people what betrayal trauma is, right? Because some people may say, oh, it's just heartbreak, right? You were cheated on, get over it. How would you address that? How do you explain that to people?
Great question. And I want to validate the misunderstanding. Even in the mental health and medical communities, I want to point out
Mhm.
remains misunderstanding about this topic. So I'm really grateful for the question. And first, I want to start briefly with the definition of trauma generally. So, trauma is a deeply distressing or overwhelming experience that evokes a sense of shock in the mind and body. And if left untreated. It doesn't always have to be treated clinically, but if just left, um, it can lead to short-term and long-term challenges because we have immediate responses to trauma, shock, hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping, anxiety. And then there's also delayed responses to trauma that a
Mhm.
lot of people aren't aware of, that seep in: depression, greater risk taking, skepticism, shame. So trauma in and of itself is a very broad lens through which to see many experiences that we have, but that the distinction between a highly stressful experience and a traumatic experience is that there's a tripwire crossed in our nervous system that gives us the signal, I can't manage this. This is too much. If we have a stressful day, like, oh, I feel afraid, I'm frazzled, there still is that sense of this is too much, but I can manage this.
Right, right.
With trauma, it crosses a line where we feel helpless, powerless, and it feels too much. I can't do this. I, I'm I'm drowning in this. So, examples of trauma may be a physical assault, witnessing violence, natural
Mhm.
disasters. We're familiar with what we would call big T traumas in the clinical field. Betrayal trauma is different in that the very person, as you said in your intro so well, Amy, the very person we expect to trust and have our back the most, when that person ends up being the person that undercuts or calculates against us and betrays our trust in a critical way. So that's really the definition: is betrayal trauma is when someone we depend on for survival, such as a child to a parent, or are deeply attached to, such as a spouse, violates our trust in a critical way. That then opens the door for the potential of betrayal trauma. So, betrayal trauma is not just confined to cheating. It can include things like sexual abuse from a person in authority that we trust or depend on. It can also be an institution. If someone has worked many years, let's say in the military, and they've devoted their life, sacrificed so much, even put their life on the line, literally, for their country, and then they are sexually assaulted in the course of that work, and then the institution doesn't have their back or doesn't believe them, that also constitutes betrayal trauma.
Right, and we
So,
see that in family courts, right? When
yes.
it is institutional betrayal that sometimes you have abuse victims who are then I had a client just this morning dealing with that the judge didn't believe her. The judge was against her in everything she said, and the other attorney was questioning her and calling her a liar. I mean, so she's grappling with betrayal trauma. We see that every day in this world I'm in, obviously, as a divorce coach.
Yes, and what you're highlighting too is what I would also call secondary trauma, which is
Right.
sometimes worse than the primary trauma
Mhm,
because it's like punching a bruise. Being
mhm.
punched hurts and it can bruise that soft tissue, but when you punch something that's already wounded, that that gets into a very dangerous territory psychologically. So when someone's reaching out for help, expecting the court, expecting a lawyer, expecting clergy or someone that they're reaching out for help because they're already in trauma,
Mhm.
when the help traumatizes us, that is secondary trauma, and it is very problematic.
Absolutely, and it's something we wrote about in the book I co-authored, Framed, Women in the Family Court Underworld. We talk about that because these women are in exactly that situation. And then, you know, to add insult to injury, they're often not understood and their behavior is misconstrued in court as they're not a sympathetic victim because they're suffering through all of this behind the scenes that many of the professionals are not educated in the way you are.
Correct, sadly. And it is not uncommon, Amy, for me to have a colleague or a professional say, Jill, she's crazy. She is like a unhinged. And when I hear that very pathologizing language, on one hand, I understand and appreciate what they're saying, sometimes with great urgency, alarm, and care, right?
Mhm.
They're not trying to insult this person always. Some people are being inappropriate, to be clear, but not always. And I think that's where the understanding and education and training for
Mhm.
professionals is so key because people do appear. And I want to also say to listeners, you can feel like you're going crazy,
Mhm.
like you're losing your mind, the racing thoughts, not being able to do your life tasks as you did maybe days or weeks ago. I'm thinking of an example of a woman who was an avid runner, entered marathons, ran daily miles. After discovering her spouse was cheating on her through a variety of means, was not able to run. She was physically able to run, but she'd start hyperventilating and came in thinking, Jill, I'm going crazy. I'm terrified. I can no longer even do the things that I love doing and that we used to be stress releasers for her.
Mhm.
So it really takes careful handling to know people do feel and sometimes even look like they're in deep, deep distress. And I'm putting in air quotes, this isn't a term I use a lot, but feel like they're going crazy. And
Mhm.
that's just it's a symptom and sign that the nervous system is in deep distress and an overwhelm and needs validation and support quickly.
Right.
Someone that understands what's happening to reassure that person you are not losing your mind, your nervous system is on fire, and you need safety first.